Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. The fellas heading out to the Pac-12, and it's about time we start putting a little bit more respect on the Oregon State Beavers. Obviously, a tough loss to Washington State, but you saw them rebound in a big way last Friday night against the Utes. Dill, this is a team that a lot of people talking about USC and Caleb Williams and Bo Nix in Oregon and Michael Penix in Washington. Yeah, those guys are all doing their thing. This Oregon State team poses a little bit of a different kind of threat and play style out in the Pac-12. It's not necessarily as flashy as the Trojans or the Ducks. That being said, it's a play style that can win this Pac-12. We've seen Utah do a very similar thing. This year, it might be Oregon State's year to make it happen. I want to dig into this program a little bit more because I feel like just the national media, us to an extent, sleeping on them a little bit. Before we do, just want to say thank you to you guys. The amount of support you guys have shown the boys, it's been truly amazing. Almost 10,000 subscribers. Can't thank you guys enough. So if you do enjoy the content and you want to support the fellas, consider subscribing to the channel. Dill, going to kick this one off to you. This Oregon State Beavers team, how dangerous do you think they can be?
And you mentioned it. They play a style of football that nobody really wants to play. Nobody, I think, recruits to play against. Nobody prepares to play against, frankly, because, again,
bully ball.
Most teams are thinking, like, how am I going to go beat USC or Washington or those type of teams? And it is. You need to be able to play against the spread. You need to be able to stop athletic, fast wide receivers to get the ball in their hands quickly. And that's just not what Utah does. They want to line it up. They want to run.
Oregon State does.
Oregon State wants to play that physical.
Hey, like similar programs. Like that's like bully ball out in the Pac-12. These teams should be in the Big Ten.
Yeah, and that's just like, I do think there is something like teams just aren't ready for that and they don't want to do it. And when you see them, like, yeah, they might have more talent. They probably recruited better and all that than Oregon State. But when they go step on the field with them, they don't want to play that game for 4 quarters. You frankly even saw them break Utah down a little bit too. It's like a slow start into that game. And then they grinded them down and really started pouring it on towards the end.
When you're grinding Utah down, that's how you know you're a special team. Like, you're beating Utah at their own game. And going back, I think that's a really good point. Like, Oregon State doesn't necessarily recruit like Oregon or USC does. They recruit a little bit of a different style of player that fits their scheme, and that scheme can give programs like USC that has the flashier 5-star talent some issues. I want to start on the offensive side of the ball, and this is truly why I think Oregon State is probably a real threat in the Pac-12. It's the run game. I mean, it's a team that's averaging 5.4 yards per carry. That's top 10 in the country. Damian Martinez averaging almost 7 yards per carry. Deshaun Fenwick averaging 6 yards per carry. A team that runs that stretch zone offense really, really good. And what I want to say is this could be a problem for teams like Oregon, Washington, USC. What's the best way to stop those quarterbacks? Like, those offenses are great. I'm not going to knock those offenses at all, but what's the best way to stop them? Yeah, you could scheme them up on the defense or just not let them on the field. And if Oregon State's a team that, hey, we're going to go to an 8-minute drive, keep that offense off the field and go put 7 on the board, limit this ball game to only 4 possessions and a half. I mean, if you're asking me what's the best way to stop Caleb Williams, it's just not letting him touch the field. And that's what Oregon State can potentially do to a team like the Trojans.
And it starts with those 2 backs, because you look at how they run that scheme. They're just like, they're perfect for it. They're both big, 6 foot, 220 plus, well over 220 pounds, it looks like, on the field.
Damian Martinez is he's a big dog.
And they can put their foot in the ground, make one cut, and just go. And you're not going down on an arm tackle. And the way they're running the scheme where, yeah, it is that zone. If they find one little crease, they're off to the races. That's just been a huge problem. And they're getting 3-4 yards anytime after their touch, not going down easy. And yeah, that's how you get first downs and how you extend drives. So, and you're looking, you got guys who are perfect for the scheme, want to do it, want to run it really well. And again, having 2 of them is really nice because they obviously are going to run a lot of times and you want to keep them fresh. And these 2 look fresh all game.
When you have 2 guys, as Michigan fans, we can kind of understand that because Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, very similar kind of game. But yeah, you have 2 running backs who, like you said, run that scheme really, really well. Like, you don't see them take negative plays. When they have that opportunity to stick their foot in the ground and get upfield, that's exactly what they're doing. Absolute bowling ball. It's physical, but can hit the big play as well. You got to shout out the offensive line too. I mean, I'm going to mess up his name, but Talisi Fuega, Joshua Gray, like really, really good tackles. They work as a unit really well. And again, when you're running that stretch zone run, like you have to be able to kind of move as one. They do a phenomenal job doing that. They're all experienced guys. And I think what's most special, we won 5 minutes without talking about DJU. Oregon State last year, a little bit limited at the quarterback spot, and just in terms of talent. Like, can that quarterback attack all angles of the field with his arm? They couldn't last year. DJU, although you want to see him play a little bit more consistent, we get that. He gives that Oregon State offense the ability to, hey, if you want to play an out to the boundary, like DJU has the arm to rip it in there. If you want to run a 20-yard post to the boundary, DJU can fit it in there with that arm strength. I think he brings just a kind of another element to that passing game. And you're seeing him really fit because they're not relying on him like Clemson did. There's hey, we're going to run the football. We're going to go play action. You're going to have some easy access throws. And I mean, DJU kind of starting to put it together, especially in that second half of that Utah game.
And he's got to be able to play like that because, frankly, you look, I think what really separates them, the quarterback play is better, but like the way Silas Bolden's playing in particular, and Anthony Gould's also playing very well. Like these two need to get their ball, like they need to get their touches, and Silas Bolden needs to get his touches down the field. I feel like DJU, he's missed them a couple times where they're open, especially Bolden. I remember the one very distinctly against Utah, and I almost think Coach Smith pulled him for that for a second and was like, "Look, this can't be missed." And he's right. If they want to go beat Utah, or like these, not Utah, but these big teams like the Washingtons, the Oregons, those throws need to be hit, and he's very capable of doing it. That to me is like the one thing they need to unlock this group. Because again, you mentioned it. He's got the talent to go, like he's far more talented than what they had last year on the roster. They have receivers are playing at that level. If they can pair that up with, again, what he did against second half against Utah, this is an extraordinarily dangerous offense.
That when they took DJU out for Aiden Childs, they just threw Aiden Childs in there against the best defense that you see in the conference. I remember looking at, I was like, that's a wild move. And I'm a massive Aiden Childs fan. That was a ballsy move by Jonathan Smith. Just toss Aiden Childs in there. The 8.3 yards per pass. That's top 30 in the country. Like when it's open, like they can hit those explosive plays. And again, when you run the ball like them and you have to start committing bodies to stop that run, that's when it starts getting open down the field. And again, like you said, Silas Bolden, Anthony Gould, get him as many touches as you can because those guys are electric with the ball in their hands. Want to talk a little bit about the defense too. And again, the offense is why I think this team can be special. Just that brand of offense, the physicality, I think poses a big problem to a lot of these Pac-12 teams. But this Oregon State defense is really solid and just kind of a complete unit. And you saw them get torched a little bit, for lack of a better term, against Washington State, especially in that first half. And my take on that, and I watched that game back a couple times in prep for Washington State previews and prep for Oregon State previews. My take on that is I'm not selling stock on Oregon State. Like Cam Ward just played a really, really good first half. Those receivers made some really, really big plays. At some point, you just got to be like, that Cam Ward just played out of his mind. Not much you can do. You look at the aggregate numbers, 17.8 points per game, top 25 in the country. They got an 8.5% sack rate. That's top 30 in the country. And they're really good against the run, only allowing 2.4 yards per carry. That's top 10 in the country. When you look at this defense from an aggregate kind of a bird's eye view, it's a really solid defense with an experienced back end.
Because even against Washington State, I mean, you saw like they were a different unit in the second half. I felt like they were playing a little more physical. Their cornerbacks were getting on wide receivers a little harder. And they were playing like a little bit more, I don't want to call it desperate, but aggressive, desperate, call it what you want. They're playing a different style of ball. And frankly, I almost wish they played that the whole half. Like, go press wide receivers. Go try to you play a really sticky game. And the only thing I thought was like really weak or really poor, again, like some of the big plays they hit, like kudos to Washington State. I mean, those are really good catches, really good throws. Like that's going to happen to you sometimes. A quarterback like Cam Ward's dialed in. There's not much you can do about it.
Yeah.
But they do have to tackle. And that's very uncharacteristic mistakes, like missing 3-4 tackles in the secondary, giving up big plays. I feel like in the last 2 years, you just haven't seen Oregon State play like that. That's why they've won so many games and been so consistent in a conference with really explosive offenses. So that to me doesn't feel like a like endemic problem or a problem that that exists and there's nothing they can do about it, like maybe like USC, where the tackling is just what it is and it's been what it is for 2 years. You really haven't seen that from Oregon State. So that doesn't like scare me. I just think that they need to play, like they need to be aggressive. They need to play their style of ball, like that tight press man. I think they do.
My take on that, and I totally agree. Like that's what you want to see get cleaned up. It goes back to like when you have the goals that Oregon State has. That's win a Pac-12 championship. Like the margins get small, and you can't give up some of those plays. And some of those plays, when you're playing really good teams like Washington State or Oregon or Washington, like those will cost you games. So if Oregon State can clean those stuff up and kind of make those plays when they present themselves, this Oregon State team, it's a really dangerous group. And you look at the schedule here, you don't play USC, which I personally think is my pick to win the conference. That being said, Washington, Oregon, like I wouldn't really argue with you much. You get Washington at home in Corvallis, and then you got a road trip to Eugene to end the season. And I really would not be surprised that we're talking end of November, Oregon State going on the road to play the Oregon Ducks. Winner goes to the Pac-12 championship game, especially with that win over Utah. I don't think that's out of the question for this Beavers team. Can't wait to see how this group develops. Again, I think there's a lot of improvements that can be made, but the bones of this team is really could be a special group in the Pac-12. Again, wanted to give Oregon State just a little bit of love, getting slept on out there in Corvallis. The boys are not sleeping on the Beavs anymore. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. Again, if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate y'all rocking with us, and we'll talk to you guys later. Peace.